I think that for a long time, Muslims, myself included, have been obviously in the hot seat, constantly countering the narrative. So we are in that posture of defense, of constantly having to explain ourselves, our religion, and what we are not.
For me, Islam is peace, Islam is culture, Islam is Muhammad Ali, Islam is Congressman Andre Carson, Islam is cab driver, Islam is your next door neighbor. That person you know, that person that you have confided with, it is part of the American fabric from the very beginning. And I think that experience of what Islam is, as an idea, as a concept, as practice, as civilization, is another way of seeing how the faith is beyond just theology.
Nobody, regardless of their race, religion, national origin, ethnicity, are born terrorists. So if you're not born that means you're going against the very nature by which you were given to progress upon. You're not born, and we can say you're not born a criminal, you're not born a murderer, none of those things. Nobody, again, it doesn't matter. All of us come here the same.
What does it mean to be American Muslim and its contribution it's making, not just to the larger world, but right here in the United States as a whole? And I frame that because I think that's an important way to situate how we see a faith tradition, but also the cultural influence of the stylistic influence of what Muslims have contributed from the very beginning of what we know the United States to develop.
I think the average American, their thoughts about Muslims and Islam, it's tough. Their information is being gotten off the TV and media. And unfortunately, most of the coverage about Muslims is negative. Even people I know very well, who are good people, peace-loving, but if they don't know another from another's community, someone from another's community, they still get caught up in the stereotypes just like anybody else. I think these folks are afraid. I think at the end of the day, they're afraid of Muslims. And if I didn't know Muslims and I didn't know Islam and I was watching the TV, I'd probably feel the same way.
We're dealing with individuals who have taken a faith tradition that is beautiful, that 2/3 of the stars in this constellation have Arabic names because of Muslim intellectuals. Algebra, even arithmetic, come from Muslims and the Arabs. So there's something there, something that has gone awry.
I found there's 4 things that come together to make a terrorist. So there's a group, there's an ideology, there's social support, and then there's whatever's inside the individual. And very few people function without a group. In recent years, we've interviewed 71 people that were part of ISIS. So they were Syrians, Iraqis, from the Balkans, Central Asia, and Europeans. And probably one of the most striking of those cases was a little boy. And when ISIS came to his town in Syria, they set up in the mosque and they proclaimed a utopia. They said, you're an oil-rich country, but you've been deprived of this oil wealth. We're here to change all that. We're going to rule according to Sunni principles. We're going to make an Islamic state. You'll have jobs, you'll have a car, you'll have wives. And this kid, he was 13, he thought it was great. He didn't even ask his parents. He just went off with them to the Cubs of the Caliphate camp. When he got there, he found out that life was really strict under ISIS. So they put him in Sharia training, and they were tough. They put him in weapons training, they were tough. And it wasn't a loving or nurturing environment in any way. And he noticed that they were starting to send kids to do suicide missions. So they would rig up cars. They had a whole factory for rigging up the cars with bombs. And they'd put these kids in the bombs. They'd film them in the bomb-rigged cars, or else they'd give them a backpack. And they'd send them to a checkpoint or send them to where ISIS was fighting, and these kids would blow themselves up. He was disturbed by it, but he's still moving forward in the line. They were assigned numbers. And he went home to visit his parents, and he told his parents that he was next in line to go and bomb himself. And his parents got crazy, of course, and sent him to Turkey. So he escaped ISIS. He said it took him a long time to come out of that mindset, that when he was in Turkey, he understood that his parents had saved his life, but he still believed in this project, the Islamic State. He still believed in the utopia. He still watched what they were doing and thought about going back. But he also wanted his life.
As you can imagine, this problem set, some of the best testimonies are those formers who have walked the front lines and gone down the extremist pathway. It's no different than individuals who were involved with gang violence, individuals who were drug recruiters as well. And I think that framing, particularly how I look at it, that those individuals who were gang recruiters and also individuals who have taken a twisted interpretation of Islam, they share a similar experience, and that is they have this desire to join a movement, and that movement oftentimes has a twisted interpretation or a narrow interpretation, whether it's ideologically driven in the form of Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Daesh, or individuals who are gang members of MS-13. They prey on vulnerable youth. They prey on vulnerable populations.
Then you need an ideology. You need something to carry you across that moral barrier of, we don't attack civilians. And someone has to convince you that, no, it's appropriate to attack civilians, and you should. And the way that works is the ideology argues for this cause. Something is so great that you need, or something so evil that you need to fight against it.
The propaganda effort to try to gain recruits and to radicalize, Americans, Muslim Americans, is colorblind, is equal opportunity. These guys target everyone, whoever can respond to their message. They want to get whoever they think they can influence.
Coming from Pakistan to the United States was a moment of crisis, to say the least, for me. I did not want it to be separated, from the only part of my background that I felt, was very close to me. It was at that point that I met, I started interacting with different people online, and these were extremists who were actually just, using YouTube as an avenue to recruit more people into the online extremist forums. My radicalization came purely as a result of these online interactions.
The third thing is support. Nowadays, social support appears on your telephone. You can be searching the internet and you can suddenly jump yourself right into a group where everybody endorses following a terrorist ideology. Everybody says you're going to be a hero.
I think we have to look past the early days where we're thinking there's a recruiter in a mosque. With the advent of the internet, with the advent of secured, encrypted applications too as well, it's very seamless. It's very quick in terms of individuals joining movements. I can tell you from my experience as well that I have worked with individuals right here in the United States of America who were joining and wanted to join extremist groups, and they joined online.
A lot of times what we're seeing is that while they're using different technology platforms, their strategies still remain the same. Of course, there are some techniques that they had to develop in order to get around a lot of the censorship that's happening online, right, by Twitter or Facebook. But for the most part, their strategies have been the same, and that's because in order for them to recruit, they have to be on the surface web and they have to be using technology platforms that are used by the mass audience.
When we look at online radicalization, a lot of people don't believe it happens only online. They think that somebody starts watching, just like you can start watching Fox News, you can start watching CNN and you get captured and you just always watch CNN. Well, you can also start watching ISIS or Al-Shabaab or whatever it happens to be and get captured into a certain mindset and narrow your focus down. But a lot of people believe that that's not enough, that you need something else to encourage you. But the truth is, once you start following somebody, you can contact these people. And the nature of social media, and ISIS was capitalizing on this, and still is when they send out a product, they can watch who likes it, who retweets it, who shares it, and they get feedback on that, and then they can contact you. They can send you a direct message and say, hey, you like my video? Or they can write on your Facebook wall, and this actually happens.
My involvement, actually grew much more deeper, step by step. At first, it was just interactions with these different extremists online on the forums. That graduated to using my Urdu language skills to translate different videos into English. The same amount of hours that a working person would work, which is like 40 to 45, hours a week, I would be on the internet, looking for more videos, something more to, give credence to my beliefs and that ideology that I was adopting. It wasn't anyone's fault in terms of doing that. It's just some kind of self-exploration that I was doing within me. Even my family did not know this identity crisis that was, within me.
They started out on Facebook and Twitter, pretty open until the crackdown started happening. Now with the recent crackdown, we've seen this huge exodus from the surface web to the deep and dark web. Violent extremist groups, ranging from ISIS to neo-Nazi groups, they're all taking advantage of the dark web. And that's because also more and more of the general population is beginning to understand how to access the dark web.
The fourth thing is whatever's inside. It can be, being an outcast, finding belonging with a certain group. It can be falling in love. It can be a misguided view of what Islam is.
You will find that a lot of it is institutional. It's the racism that they're facing in schools. It's, being slighted because they're a minority or because of their religion.
My first name is Muhammad, so a lot of people would just tease me that, Muhammad is a terrorist, Getting those taunts and jibes again and again was very difficult for me to process. At that point, I was just a young kid. I'm trying to study, trying to make friends, trying to make connections, just like anyone else. And just being labeled as a terrorist, and again, having that sense of connection with the religion and trying to rebuild upon that connection, it really gave rise to that frustration that why is the only thing that's stable in my life, which is my religion, being attacked?
We had Shannon Connolly in Denver. At 17, she converted from Catholicism to Islam, put on a burqa and a niqab, and then she went searching the internet. Well, she found Anwar al-Awlaki. She started following him, and he taught that every Muslim is supposed to fight jihad, and every Muslim is supposed to migrate to Muslim lands. And she bought it hook, line, and sinker. She bought it, and then she started chatting with people, and she fell in love with a Tunisian ISIS fighter. And the most bizarre thing in that story is he proposed marriage to her and told her to come over to ISIS, but he followed the traditional marriage proposal and asked to propose to her father over Skype. So can you imagine this American white father getting a proposal from ISIS for his daughter? But that's what happened.
The number of permutations of why someone radicalized is huge. And that's why we're using technology like machine learning to help us better understand these things, because humans simply, we cannot compute such big data sets.
That's basically what we hear from everyone that's been in ISIS that has come to denounce the group, that they thought they were going to bring a good version of Islam, that they were going to make an ideal state, and instead they were horribly un-Islamic, and that they were horrifically brutal.
I was imprisoned, in a juvenile facility at first. Being a recluse that I was, I did not really want to share my experiences with anyone, much less the staff members whom I felt were the enemy. Eventually I opened up about my experience of being an immigrant in this country, about my isolation, about my alienation, about all the frustrations that I felt. Instead of judging me and instead of evaluating my actions, the staff members of that juvenile facility just understood. They just listened, and they gave me hope. And it's very hard, maintaining hope in a prison setting, knowing that you're going to face, decades, behind bars, and still having that hope up. They tried their best to at least, give me some sliver of that hope that there is a way out of this if you change what you believe in.
There are symbolic truths in our collective mythologies as human beings that empower us to come out of our state or condition. Wherever Islam has gone, it has adopted and changed based on the local culture. But I think the African American tradition brings something else. It brings a deeper insight into the construct of America because African Americans helped build this country.
It's an honor to be at this masjid where we are right now. I mean, this is an 80-year community today as of this interview. And the fact that it's now also the oldest mosque or masjid, which is the proper name, in America, that was built by 100% American citizens or grassroots American citizens. But also those citizens, they just happen to be descendants of enslaved Africans.
30 to 40% of those enslaved Africans who journeyed on a voyage, not by choice, came here, many in the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia, and they brought a nonviolent, pragmatic, practical, peaceful, spiritual form of Islam.
I had a very, anti-establishment mindset in my earlier years in high school. As I grew in college, I started to see the limits of that mode of thinking, of just being very defensive. I was looking for spirituality because I realized that just being angry about political conditions or social conditions was not enough to create change. Islam actually, to me, brought maturity to my intellect.
Even as imperfect as I am, I still want to push the mark further for future generations. I mean, if it's up to me to use my voice as a Muslim to say, hey, I'm a Muslim, but I'm also a former police officer. I'm also someone who's deeply concerned about our national security and our economy. Here's where we are. And I think that's important, but that doesn't take away from the work that scholars do, from what activists do, from what you're doing and what others are doing. I'm just a part of the puzzle.
I don't take off my Islam at the end of the day when I leave the job. For me, Islam is part of me. It's always going to be part of me. Islam is about guidance and light. And I think it's important for folks like that have that understanding, to be involved in going against the negative, the negative portrayal of Islam. We have to.
We're in the nation's capital. In fact, I just found an interview that Malcolm X did when he was assigned to be the leader here, right where I'm the leader now. And in that interview, he was asked, why were you sent to be the leader here? And he was told that this mosque, being the first, was put here in the nation's capital because this is an international city. And it is the heart of America in terms of its capital. And he said that we want to have an international expression.
So one might ask whose problem this is. Is this the problem of a particular faith? Is it the problem of Islam? Is it the problem of Judaism, of Christianity? In the time of post-11, there's a lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding. And for those of us who are not Muslims, we know that that kind of fear and misunderstanding emerges at times of stress and has emerged in the past. And sometimes it's been directed at this religious group and sometimes at that religious group. So it's really important in time of stress for people to understand we're all in this together.
I think growing up, faith for me was a zero-sum game, that my faith could not exist and be the truth, while other faiths could exist and be the truth. And zero-sum games just aren't possible in interfaith work. And when you learn the stories of other people, you realize that multiple truths exist at once, and multiple truths enrich each other.
We know that the Prophet was so concerned about the issue of race that he addressed it in his last sermon, where he said there's no superiority, the Arab over the non-Arab, black over the white. and he talked about treating people with equity. Jesus told his disciples, "He who wishes to be chief amongst you shall first be your servant." So that tells me treating people fairly and having a servant mindset is the key to success.
Many of my Muslim friends, including imams who are good friends of mine, say that the United States of America is the best place to be a Muslim in the world. That the freedom of religion we have here enables you to develop your Muslim identity proudly. And there's no place in Muslim majority countries where Islam is as free to develop as it is in this country.
The burden is not on you to convince other people to change their views. There's a very fine line, right? You have no control over what people think. The only thing you have control over is you and what you do and how you interact with them.
The prophetic tradition and the prophetic narration that my companions are stars and you've been guided by each and every one of them is just one example of why it is important that Muslims themselves must be an example in every aspect of their life. It's a high standard to live up to, recognizing we will fall short. But those standards are ones in which one can strive for every day.
In the particular of the 9/11, the terrorists, those perpetrating the violence, weren't targeting one particular group, they were targeting America. And we are all Americans. There are Muslims who died on that date, and they died for no reason whatsoever. They were as innocent as everybody else.
I think what's key is to know and be in relationship with the other, someone that's different from you. I believe Islam teaches us that with the verse in the Quran that says, "I created you for what? To get to know one another. I created you of different nations, ethnicities, tribes, however you may translate it, but for what? To get to know one another." And so I think that's the mandate, actually, for Muslims, especially in the world right now.